Great. Anybody else? Because I think we can go to we can do new business and then we can do our subcommittees that Jim could.
So new business, we sort of touched on it slantingly a while ago, but what's in the paper is that Metro North says that what we need to pay them on an annual basis is going to go from 70 million to something like 110. And the governor is saying that there's no fare increase in the budget, therefore somebody's going to have to deal with it. But it's like a balloon, you push on one side, it's got to pop out somewhere else.
So let me tell you what the story should have said. Put it in some context. Every year, the MTA, as the entity, the big entity, does a 5-year plan, and every year they update that. Last year's plan called for, well, it didn't call for fare increases. What it said was that in 2015 and 2017, based on their forecast for the entire entity, there would be a 4% revenue gap in those 2 years. So they came out with, as they updated their budgets this year, and said, good news, it didn't get any worse. Because even though expenses may have gone up, we have saved, through extraordinary efforts, enough money to keep it at the 4% gap across that organization. What that doesn't say is how does that 4% gap in revenue get applied to each of the entities? That includes tolls over bridges and, transit agencies and everything else. We don't know. And it doesn't, and it's not a budget. It's a 5-year plan. Metro North, as a sub-entity, doesn't have a budget and won't, based on their normal schedule, until November, when they typically go through a board deliberation process for adoption for a fiscal year that starts in January. Okay? So their fiscal year is different than ours. That makes it also complicated to understand. So in a 5-year budget forecast, there are numbers that get sort of shown as the potential allocation to Connecticut, but they have nothing to do with the budget yet. They have nothing to do with the fare increase yet. Many of the potential issues are not in the budget that we've already discussed. So as of May, when the governor's budget and the legislative approval vetted the latest numbers for Metro North, we have a budget that's in balance that calls for no fare increase. And at a minimum, that means half of the fiscal year that we're in is absolutely fine. And I don't know what's going to happen, which is what I said to Martin. I can't react to hypotheticals because there is no budget yet. We're not even close. And we do that together. So we haven't started that discussion. It won't end until January with a final adoption by the Metro North Board. And then how that gets allocated ultimately, if there is an impact other than what I've already got in my budget, because some of the deltas were already accomplished in the end of the year legislative session when I knew some of them could foresee some of those changes, right? So if something new comes down the pike, or they change their mind, or the 4% becomes something different, and it could be something else, we'll let you know when we know. And that's what I said to Martin, who said we were going to have fare increases. There's no fare increase in this budget. It was adopted in May. Okay. In terms of the this question of how does this all work out from a fare increase point of view, I have been very careful to ask Metro North to get me details of a fare increase if there's going to be one, right? A specific fare increase to deal with the 4% revenue gap. And a revenue gap is different than a fare increase. If I need 4%, so if Metro North has to raise 4%, that's one question. Maybe they put it all on the highways. Maybe they put it all somewhere else, right? I don't know yet. If they had to do 4%, if you do a fare increase, you probably generate higher fares to get 4%, right? I mean, I don't know. That's how I do it. There's some loss. I don't know what the proposal is. If there were going to be a fare increase in New York, I want to know that nobody who goes between Connecticut and New York would ever be touched by a fare increase. That's why the governor asked for that information. I set the fares from every Connecticut station through to Grand Central. I do not set fares between any stations in New York. But if a customer gets on in Stamford and gets off at Harrison, and they raise the Harrison fare, but I don't raise the Stamford fare, I don't know how that's gonna play out. Right? You understand where I'm coming from? So right now, we're talking about complete hypotheticals, and I have no data. The governor asked for data and facts as soon as possible to help inform decision-making. So all the speculation is complete speculation, and there is no fare increase in this budget.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
And I'm really, truly asking this from the basis of, I am 100% happy with the fares, me personally. And
Well, yeah.
quite frankly, would pay more, right? No, I mean, I would. I mean,
Intrastate, of course.
I understand, that's fair.
You're the
So-
ones that need to have a fare
By the way.
increase, no
No, so I'm happy with the fares completely, seriously. So, but I've heard it referenced, and I truly don't know what it means, to be honest with you, so maybe it's an ignorant question or what we do. So I've heard them reference, and I saw the paper
Yep.
said, Connecticut has the lowest subsidy in the nation or the highest fare box returns. I
Yep.
don't know what that
Yep.
means, honestly.
Okay. So, that statistic, fare box ratio or recovery ratio, means that revenues brought in from passenger fares divided by the total expense for the operating and maintaining the railroad. It excludes any capital expenses, any capital dollars, right? So construction dollars are a totally separate budget. And some would interpret the higher you get, right? So if you get 100%, you're breaking even. If you get 105%, you're making money. Well, we're not. There isn't a railroad, except for Acela Trains, that actually makes money. Nowhere, anywhere. There's not a bus company anywhere that, public transit, not express, charter stuff, that makes money. On average, commuter rail systems probably bring, I'm gonna, order of magnitude, bring in nationally, commuter rails, about 35%. The New Haven line brings in the mid-70s. Now, that's a reflection of two things. One, you could interpret that, and some do, and I don't necessarily. It's often interpreted that the higher the fare box ratio, the more efficient the service is. But the New Haven line has a very long line, and the fares are distance-based, so the fares go up as you go, right? So the expense is spread across a very long line, and the Connecticut share of that is the higher fare. So the recovery ratio for the line tends to be pretty high. But it's also a reflection, which most commuter railroads don't have, of the fact that the New Haven line is very heavily utilized locally, right? And reverse direction. Most commuter railroads go in the morning and come back at night, and there's nobody in between. We run 24/7, both directions, packed to the gills. So we're selling and reselling seats in both directions all day long. And that brings up the yield. We're still losing money, and it's subsidized. Just quick corollary, on the bus side, the average is 25% in the state of Connecticut. So it's sort of the inverse. It's 75 on this side, 25 on the other one. The total dollars to subsidize the bus company are the same as subsidizing the railroad. The net subsidy for rail is the same as bus. And the total number of customers on rail and bus is the same, 36 odd million customers a year. So that's Connecticut's sort of metrics. As a state, in terms of support for the subsidy, if you will, for the public transit network, Connecticut ranks near the top of the country in terms of public support for transit. There are far less expansive systems and far less state support for public transit in most states. So this is an extraordinary positive state in terms of the public subsidy and appreciation for, if you will, for the role of public transit in the state of Connecticut. It's higher than New Jersey, it's higher than a lot of places, and I think part of that is because we've had the benefit of a trust fund, right, that has been stable or growing historically, now stable, maybe it'll disappear a little bit, but in the longest haul, but that's been a source to be able to sustain this system. It is, however, just as to get back to the efficiency argument, it is one, both bus and rail, of the most efficiently operated, from a cost effectiveness point of view, using other measures, systems in the country. And a lot of people don't think that about Metro-North, but they are a well-run railroad compared to others. It is far more efficient, for example, than lots of the systems that are subsidizing Amtrak to run things. I mean, it's just the way that things go. And I'm pretty close to that because I'm dealing with all the cost allocation for Amtrak across the country on the Northeast Corridor Commission. I see those numbers. Same thing on the bus side. And it's been interesting how it's been managed. We don't get from the state enough money every year to meet all the inflationary and labor contract costs for the bus side. So it means we have to schedule more efficiently and run the services more efficiently, and every year we've been cranking that for the last decade. So if you look at the performance statistics, not fare box ratio, we are right at the top of performance metrics in the country. So it's a well-run, relatively speaking, system. That help?
Yes, thank you.
Just-
Now, one other point, and I don't want, this is not a dig. The New Haven line, main line is 76%. The branch lines are not.
Probably a lot lower, I would imagine.
They're in the 20s.
They're heavily subsidized.
Every one of them,
And Shoreline East.
and Shoreline East.
Yeah. But you're looking at the fare box ratio, and you mentioned something about efficiency.
I said divorce it, because
I understand that.
people may do that, and I
understand
don't,
that.
because it's a
And
misnomer.
What I look at it, I look at it completely differently, the fare box return. In Connecticut, as you said, it's around 75% for Metro North, for the main line. In Long Island Railroad, it's around 50%. And what I attribute that to is a less willingness on the part of the state of Connecticut to support the fares than it is in New York.
No, and when really go back to the fact that, so Long Island is still very much a traditional commuter railroad. There's nothing like the New Haven line in terms of the stop-to-stop, both directions, forward and reverse, in and out. The idea that Stamford is bigger than, is the second largest station, there's more people coming to Connecticut than going to New York, is not repeated anywhere else in the country. And that means you're selling those seats multiple times when other railroads do not. And the reason the fare box ratio is higher is because it's a long line with high fares and lots of people riding. It's the highest utilized railroad in the country.
But if we compare fares on Metro North to fares on the Long Island Railroad, for
Same.
equivalent distances.
Same. It's the same fare structure, which I don't appreciate because it gives me less flexibility, but when Metro North sets fares, they set them across both railroads with the exact same policies and procedures that give me less flexibility than I'd like. They are high fares. New Jersey Transits are just as high, but there is also a value proposition in terms, from my perspective, of what the railroad gets in terms of options for driving and the amount of service and the quality of the service that is extraordinary.
So, I'm sorry, while on the fare boxing, so you mentioned the 70%.
Yeah.
So is that like 30%? Is that what is that the subsidy when they refer to subsidy? Okay, so it's the separation, the subtraction of the
That's
fare
right.
box from the, okay.
That's right.
Thank you.